think I'm gonna throw this on the second monitor and just like do a Vanquish or something.
Should do a Cantha Vanquish in honor of what is gonna get ruined.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's a good idea.
Just relive the untainted memory of proper Cantha one last time.
There's familiarity in this strangeness. Like a song, half remembered, a tune without words to carry it. I know you, and yet I don't.
You will soon, little one.
Who are you talking to?
Just an echo in the mist. A possibility.
Look around us. Your children would be trapped in the past, if not for me. Their worlds are carved from the jade that I gave purpose. I promised them a future. A century of progress cannot end this way. I'm not... Cantha's not just a spoke in some grand cosmic wheel.
Would a great innovator give up so easily on that promised future?
I won't. I'll find a way to save us all.
Can we talk about that trailer? It was just like unrecognizable. Like, yeah, like what am I watching?
I saw it. I was like, what is this? Because there's I know it's about Cantha, obviously, but I thought about it after.
If you were to just take that trailer and like
said, if you showed me that same trailer and told me this is like a new game called like Dragonlands or something, yeah, I would accept that as like, okay, it's a new franchise.
Yeah,
obviously you have to cut the Asura out or something. You know, there's some signifiers, but not very many signifiers of this is Guild Wars. And on top of that, this is Cantha in Guild Wars 2. There was no really recognizable landmarks.
I guess
that
like
tree,
you see Xingje at the beginning, but it's still like Guild Wars 2-ified, like overly exaggerated cliffs and like. Like they gave it the Istan treatment. Like,
yeah, they gave the whole continent. I mean, we joked a long time ago about, well, I've joked persistently that they will have Caning City be flooded and f***ed up like Babby is with the crystals and stuff. I'm pretty sure I'm right. We haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, it's like, okay, Path of Fire, great maps. Like, they are true to Guild Wars 1, like, iconic locations. Heart of Thorns, it's like, what even is Tangled
Depths.
Are all like,
those are all like,
and then you have like Istan, which is the worst kind of one, where it's like it's like so close, but like uncanny valley. Like they just took all these weird liberties and
shat all over.
It's like there's remnants of like things that you love the most.
So there's like with some of the Path of Fire maps, they're fine. I got a problem with it. But Vabi and Istan, the most iconic locations, probably.
Yeah, it's like, oh, you want Vabi back? Here's some branded crystals.
You want Vabi? Half the fucking place is shat all over with crystal storm stuff, and people are just like, who cares? Doesn't make any sense. Like people would be like, oh my god, we're under attack, let's flee. But they have some kind of lore thing that's like, oh, Joker said he did it or something. Stupid. Either way, Istan is the same thing. So it looks a bit like Istan, but it's covered in Pawala Joko's literal shit, and
they added like weird cliffs and stuff that like weren't there.
Yeah, and it has statues everywhere. I know it's part of like the joke or whatever, but it just makes it like unpleasant to be in. And you want with game stuff, you have to strike a weird balance of like it has to be. If you're obviously trying to make somewhere unpleasant, it still has to be somewhere you want to explore. I don't want to explore Istan or Vabi because they're just frustrating, basically.
Or sunken Kaineng City.
Or sunken Kaineng City, or
I mean, people complained about exploring Kaineng City before it was sunken.
Yeah,
which
and it's gonna be
I never agreed with because I like it, but yeah, like it's gonna feel like you know how there are like fractals that like vaguely resemble the real world, but it's like weird floaty islands and like shattered things. Like that's what Cantha's gonna feel like. Like it's gonna be like, oh, this has like like underlying references to Cantha, but it's just like a weird, like floaty, like bubbly, watery, like fever dream version of this place that you once knew and loved.
So I've made a little list of what we know so far. Flooded Cantha, boats, fishing, multiplayer mounts. That's it for new stuff. New strike missions. That's new of an old thing. And Aurene inspired legendaries. And again, those are just new skins.
Like a worse version of an already existing
A
thing.
worse version of an already existing thing. Probably. We don't know what they look
You want,
like,
I mean, Colgate toothpaste sparkles.
Yeah, Colgate toothpaste sparkle for all your weapons, not just like one of them. Even then, they said Exortium or whatever was inspired by Aurene because it does like rainbow stuff. But now they're all that. That seems foolish to me. If anything, I think they're passing off a fancy weapon set as legendaries.
Yeah, it probably was like it was gonna be like a black.
It's gonna be it's gonna be like a black line set or a kind of end game set, and they were like, no, we can make these legendaries. People like legendaries, right? And they just made them into legendaries. That seems much more likely to me than they purposely said, yes, we'll make 12 legendaries and
well, because remember how long it took them to come out with
it took
set
them
two? Like 2
5
years?
Yeah, 2 years, maybe 5 years, isn't it? It's shocking to me how like little there. Now maybe there's something that will be revealed that will change everything we've said into lies. Some feature that wasn't leaked, or some feature that they wouldn't have put in like press releases because most outsiders don't care, but to us players is something like, oh wow, I didn't know I wanted this. Like, I don't know, you can swap professions now or something like that. You know, if you announce that on like a press release thing, you can swap professions or there's secondary professions or something. That's not a big feature really, because it doesn't make sense to anyone else outside the game. But saying that you can fish, people understand you can't usually fish, now you can fish. I don't know, maybe that's the tiny bit of optimism I have left there. But I was watching a bit of One Potato's stream. People in the chat, not just his chat, other places, are still like, oh, Tengu though. Oh, it would be really fun to play as a Tengu. There's no Tengu. There never would be. Why would especially we know there's not going to be, because that would be something they announce in a press release.
Well, here's what makes this all like ironic is like, okay, all this talk about like a big killer expansion feature equivalent to mounts or gliding. It's like, I don't even know if I actually want that. I just want like good gameplay. I just want like engaging content. Like, yeah. I would much rather they say like, hey, there's not really a big selling point, but like there's missions in the style of Guild Wars 1 missions that are easily replayable and like engaging. Like, fine.
Yeah. And Eye of the North was announced as one of the big features of it was its dungeons. The whole thing was like, you could go in dungeons and stuff, and there's instanced high-end content for players to do. That was the whole point of that expansion, really. Everything else was secondary. ArenaNet's got it the other way around, where they think the superficial things like fishing are the tentpole things.
Or like going on a Disney World ride and listening to NPCs talk for 4 hours before you can do like one fight that you can't lose at. Like,
if they announced, okay, this is like the high-end expansion where we're going to have content, like we're going to have new things called Cantha Crisis missions, like I memed on the other day. But in theory, you can make it into something good, where we're going to focus on high-level 50-player instances that are like raids, but on a bigger scale, where you have to split off and do things. A bit like the marionette fight they just added, but with more thought to it. Because in the marionette fight, you have to split into 5 lanes of 10 people. In the instance version, I should say, not the public one. You split into 5 lanes of 10 people, and you have to do different things each, and you take turns to do it, a bit like Vine Wrath and that kind of thing. But if you had an actual game mode focused on that kind of content, which is like you are in small groups, so essentially you go off and do a raid boss, 10 of you, another group does another raid boss, 10 of you, and then you join up again, 20 of you, to do some big boss.
That sounds like FOW or UW.
That sounds
like
FOW.
an elite
It sounds
zone.
like UW. An elite zone where you are doing both small scale content, which the game excels at, 10 man, 5-man content or whatever, but you also have the big world event stuff in the kind of 50-man
and
zone.
they have the architecture for that with this like public private instance thing.
Yeah.
Like,
And
I don't know. I'm like reading the Twitch chat right now. It's just like people like putting hearts up for Timey. Like
it's hyper cringe.
like it's like a meme, but I seriously feel like it's just such a different audience. Like the Guild Wars audience is gone.
That's
like
it's like an old observation that even like Teapot subscribed to, but he seems to have, I don't know, moved on it into a kind of do what you want, I don't care, play how you want, don't hate on the game mentality. I don't know. At least that's what I saw on the brief bit I saw of the stream today. But that's true that it's happened. That there is not a replacement. That sounds conscious, but there is two audiences to Guild Wars 2. There is the kind of casual, I guess you can say casual hardcore, but it's not as simple as that, because there's a lot of subgroups to those groups. Like, you know, there's the PvP hardcore who don't give a shit about PvE hardcore stuff, and sometimes they cross over and sometimes they don't. But either way, the broadly speaking casual, let's say story-based audience, and the not story and the content-based audience, that is maybe a bad split as well, but we'll work with it. The story-driven audience actually like the characters and want to see how the story progresses and a bunch of other stuff like that. But the content audience sees, well, there's no content here, so I'm not interested. And they check out the story completely, even if they might care about those characters. They don't care because the actual content that story is tied to is not interesting. Their interest lies elsewhere in the fractal stuff, in the raid stuff, in the strike mission stuff. Now, to be fair, they do strike missions again, but strike missions are like the weakest of those three.
yeah, like
It's you can have.
I care the least about.
Yeah, you have like a. You have bosses and PvE stuff in fractals, and sometimes interesting mechanics play in as well. And then raid, you have a lot of boss stuff, and it's complicated and hard and challenging, etc., etc. And then strikes are just like you hit the boss and it dies. Sometimes they have some mechanics or whatever, but not to the same extent as raid bosses. And even then, you can argue it's just like a raid that's split up into 3 separate missions as opposed to one big raid.
But they're still like not engaging like raids are.
Some of them are more engaging, like I think it's Voice of Dromeg, like the snake guy. That is essentially just a raid boss, but it's a single instance raid, as in like that's all you do. But some of the other ones, like the ice construct, you just slap the thing and it falls over.
Yeah, I mean, I've been having more fun replaying the vanilla dungeons for the 80 trillionth time this past week than I have ever had in a strike. Like, yeah, I'm a little concerned about like the island chain thing. Like, it's not going to be a continent; it's going to be like a chain of islands.
That one, again, the flooded city meme. I didn't want to be true. I was like, I hope they don't do that, but I think they will. I think it'll be like, you know, they're trying to do the Hana kind of, the place, you know, this is a familiar place, but now it's different because time's progressed and whatever, which fair enough. But you can have a place look different without like just shitting all over it, which is what they've done for most of Guild Wars 1 maps as well. You know, Lion's Arch is underwater, obviously, because it's flooded or whatever, so they rebuilt, and then obviously they rebuilt it again in our timeline.
But like Elon Riverlands, great job. Perfect representation of 250 years passed on this map.
Yeah, that has some slight changes that don't wreck the place. Like it has, you know, patches of sand that would have just been boring sand before, and now like big quicksand pools. Okay.
Yeah, and the best part is like the Crystal Desert in Guild Wars 1 like was very like fragmented and like you only got to go to small parts of it. Now in Guild Wars 2 it's like you can go to the whole thing like seamlessly like in these giant maps. Like wow, good job.
Yeah. For the most part, I like the Path of Fire maps. It's really just bad.
Yeah, that's the best part about that expansion. Like the maps.
The Abbey and Istan probably the worst, and I think Corner's a bit crappy as well. But that's more.
Those
due
are
to
like
the,
living story, I guess. I'm talking
Yeah,
about like the vanilla
kinda-
Pathfire.
Babby was-
I liked the left half of the Vavi map.
Yeah, half the Babby map's nice. The other half is not nice.
The Desolation map was really cool. Like,
Yes.
I remember they did an interview with the developer saying like, yeah, we pulled up the map editor for Guild Wars 1 and like went like 1-to-1, like looking at where stuff like even like the distances between stuff is like correct. Like,
Yeah.
I doubt they did that for this.
I doubt they did it for this because the whole thing is.
Because all the developers are gone. Like,
Yeah, I think even then it may even they'll just redo all the architecture. So with the great, I have to go do this history bit because it will be relevant to some of the changes. In Divinity's Reach, there was supposed to be not an instance. In Divinity's Reach,
the Cantha
there was supposed
section,
to be the Canthan Quarter. They made it. There's screenshots of it that exist if you can find them.
Yeah, it was like in the game.
It was in the game, and then they showed it to like NCSoft, and they got annoyed. Not just them. It was like people they showed it to got annoyed at the mix of architectures between Korean and Chinese and Japanese, and they were like, "Oh, you can't do that. That's racially insensitive." So they were like, "What do we do with this whole district that we made?
Put a hole in it.
Make it into a big fucking hole," was the answer. And the law is that the area like collapsed or something. And they said when they talked about this that they called it the Great Collapse because it was like there was a big breakdown of communication about this topic between them, and the whole thing collapsed. So they just they embraced that feeling and made that the case, and then they replaced it with the coronation. So I think after that that's why they couldn't do Cantha, partially why they couldn't do Cantha for a long time, because they were like, well, how do we handle, Cantha is inspired by all these East Asian cultures. How do we combine them in current year without offending East Asians? And the answer was, don't bother for years. Don't even refer to Cantha. It was too much trouble. Then there was a rumor that they wanted to do Cantha, but they were like, we can't do another Chinese or an East Asian themed MMO because we have Blade and Soft. NCSoft said this. NCSoft is East Asian. I think it's Chinese folklore based or something. So they didn't want to do like a competing product to themselves, which makes sense to an extent. But now it's been a few more years, so they're doing Cantha again, and I think they've had to pick a culture to draw from primarily. Whereas before it was a mix, so it had a kind of unique aesthetic as a result.
But then like,
whereas now
Kurzik had like Gothic.
Yeah,
like...
so it had the Kurziks were like German and Asian inspired, and the Luxons were like Greek and Asian inspired, and it has this again very unique mix of things. Like Cantha is not just it's China, it's Japan, it's a mix of all of them. So that's why it has a unique aesthetic to it. While obviously
and Kurziks were like white.
Yeah, and Kurziks were like, I can't remember if they, I can't remember the exact law, but they either wear white makeup, or I think it implies that they went super pale because they're under trees all the time, so they don't get any sunlight.
Oh yeah, that makes sense, I guess.
But they have kind of German names, so it's sort of a weird mix of things.
Yeah, like
but
Baron
I really think they're gonna,
Heltzer, stuff like that.
They're really gonna I really think they're gonna cut that kind of stuff out, and it'll just be like, the Canthan Empire people are Japanese. The end. Close the book. And then maybe even that they would retcon the Luxons are Korean and the Kurziks are Chinese. Maybe something like that. But they seem, from what I've seen so far with stuff to do with Cantha, they seem to be focusing on Japanese influence. Like Belinda's greatsword, who's Canthan, is a katana. Well, a odachi or whatever the big katana's called. Odachi, maybe. Then they added the samurai skins recently. Well, samurai is obviously Japanese. And they have a katana and wakizashi as little weapons that you can get as well. And they have the Shrine Guardian outfit, which I think is pretty Japanese inspired, and it draws on like Shinto kind of, spirits and everything stuff. So they seem to have picked Japan, I think. So that means the whole thing won't look like Cantha. It'll look like Japan.
All of the things that made Cantha and Factions such like beloved games are like not gonna be a thing, including like the mix of cultures and architecture and like unique zones. Like think about how Prophecies was a great game, but it was like, okay, you have your forest, you have your jungle, you have your mountains, you have your Fire Island and your desert. Like just like very like realistic like Earth inspired places, but Cantha had like a full region that was like an entire city, which was like rare for like RPG like fantasy type games. You had a frozen sea of jade, you had a stone forest, like you had the faction system, like the alliances, which created the fun stuff of like Suxons and tree huggers and Kurziks, like all of those things were the things people liked about Cantha. Also, assassin, ritualist, like new classes. Like none of those things are going to be in Guild Wars 2. Like none of them.
I just hate being right all the time. I really wanted to be wrong. I was more right than even I recognized.
Like it seriously feels like something you would put in one of your April Fool's videos.
Yes.
Like the kind of stuff that we like sit in a chat for like hours coming up with like
meme thing. Like the joke one has been like skiing for a snow expansion or surfing for a boat expansion. Not boat, an underwater expansion or whatever. But literally boats and
which makes it funnier because it's literally like 1/5 of what the last expansion reveal was. Like mounts, there was one mount, the skimmer, that was essentially just a boat. So this is like 1/5 of what the last expansion's feature was.
And it's like the main feature. And yes, they have another. They have a siege turtle or something.
It holds like 2 people.
When it holds 2 people, but
that's kind of cool. Like
when the f you ever going to use that? Is the first thing, and the second of all, turtles are not known for their speed, so it's gonna be slow as fuck.
That's what I'm thinking about.
3,
it goes so slow.
Why would you ever have to use that 2-seater thing? It's presumably siege turtle means you're gonna use the cannon on it and stuff, and you have like a little tank thing going, but you don't use mounts for that currently. You use the mount skill once, and then you're off it.
Maybe you can do combat on it, but I don't know.
I don't.
But still, like
even then, it doesn't sound. If like sounds. You can play the whole game in a tank, like Battlefield or something. No thanks. I'd rather do something else or have some bigger feature or I don't know. It's like of all the things they could have done, they picked pretty much the worst thing they could have done in terms of the feature list or whatever. And when I say, we're coming out with an expansion, fishing is not a top list top of the list feature. It's like that's a thing on the side. It's a top of the list feature. It's like number 3.
Yeah, and it's like the fishing competition. Forget fractal leaderboards. Now we have fishing leaderboards, dude.
So, yeah. Are you excited for End of Dragons?
I'm not excited, but, like, I'll play it.
Me too.
I mean, it's like we just spent, like, a long time crapping on the game, but we're both gonna buy the, like...
We're both gonna buy the most expensive version. We're in an abusive relationship. Please send help.
Here's what I'll say. I am more excited to replay Factions for the 87th time than I am to play End of Dragons, but I'll still play End of Dragons, I guess. I'm like interested in the elite specs, kinda.
Yeah, that's true. Elite specs.
Like I don't know, as much as we like crapped on like fishing and boating, like I can see finding enjoyment in those things. I just think it's goofy as like a selling point.
It's not a main feature. That to me does not excite me at all. These are things that you could say they should have been in the game years ago. Not as a great feature, but as it's a part of the course.
It's the kind of stuff. It's the kind of stuff that will be fun, like like in between content. Like if we ever like get a raid group back together, like after a raid or like while we're waiting for somebody to log in, it'll be fun to like troll around on a boat. But like it's not going to be like let's log in and go on a fishing trip. You know what I mean? It'll be a fun like after dungeon activity.
But also it'll be the classic ArenaNet two-way thing where it's never just like a fun addition. It'll be a fun addition that if you want to actually do anything useful with, you have to make it completely unfun and do it for 20,000 hours to collect all the fish and get something fancy.
But yeah, I guess I'll buy the game. If you want to join my Guild Wars 1 Boomer Guild, check out the link in the description. Also, check out my Factions playthrough if you want more Cantha. That's myself plugging for the video. Bye. This is Doombox signing out.